Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you are well wherever you are, whatever you're doing. Sorry it's been so long since I've got a video out. Man, it has all been happening down here in New Zealand. You might have heard, we are in lockdown, total lockdown for COVID-19. We've had a Delta outbreak, and also just this last week we had massive flooding in the area where I live. So this whole basement here has just been, my whole garage and basement's just been wiped out. So I've got turbo dryers, had them going 24/7, had to turn my rigs off for a whole day. I was gutted because they've been running sweet and haven't had to turn them off at all. And then both these guys had to go down because there's just way too much humidity, and I did not want to fry them, getting moisture in them. So, but they're back up now. The Ravencoin, it's the little Ravencoin rig and the little Ethereum rig, and they're going sweet. They're going great guns. So time to start a new build. So this is all the gear here that's arrived, so that's good. And this is going to be kind of a budget build is what I'm going for. So kind of to see what we can do for around 3,000 US dollars, or about 4,300 Kiwi dollars, I think this lot costs. So I thought that'd be useful, but then as I started ordering stuff, I started realizing that it's very hard to do a video for an international audience based on a budget build when the budget is being set by what we can get here in New Zealand and what we pay for stuff, right? So, but I thought that wherever you are in the world, you can sort of see what I'm using and the ideas behind why it's able to save money doing it this way, and you can apply it to what equipment you can get in your area, right? It doesn't really matter. I mean, you might better get the cards cheaper, but it might cost you a bit more for the motherboard, or vice versa, or whatever. But obviously if you're in the States or any of those bigger countries, Europe, you can probably get this stuff way cheaper. If you're in Asia, then yeah, you can probably get it cheaper again. But anyway, so let's have a look at what we've got, and what I'll explain to you why I've bought each component and how it's going to contribute to the build. So obviously the base of any build is going to be the motherboard, and this is the BTC T37, and this is pretty much like a budget mining motherboard. These are clones of what was originally the Octominer board, from what I can tell, and you can get several different kinds. This is the most basic one, I think. It comes with an ATX power supply. You can get the same board or a similar board that uses a server power supply, and you can plug a server power supply straight into it. So that's pretty handy if that's what you want to do. But the thing with these boards is they're riserless. So as you can see, you've got your full 16 times PCIe bus there. So you don't need to buy risers. So straight off the bat, that saves a little bit of money. You don't have to buy risers and cables for risers. For a full set of risers, here's about $100. So that's about $100 off your build. And risers are pretty unreliable, as you know. Normally you buy a set and at least one of them's a dud. So having a build with a riserless board might be one way of saving a bit of money. Can help for the budget. The other thing is they come with the CPU already on the board, so it's already included, the CPU and the little cooler there. The RAM, I've bought extra RAM. Sometimes they come with 4 gig of RAM. That's enough if you're going to be using Linux, Hive OS probably, but for Windows that won't be enough, so I've bought an 8 gig stick and fitted that. That's DDR3 RAM, which is what you would get in an older laptop. So what I can gather, the actual componentry of the board, the actual system part of the board is laptop technology, and older laptop technology at that. So it'll be interesting to see how this thing performs. I'm not expecting it to be a rocket ship by any means, but then again, we're not playing games on it, it's just for mining. So as long as it's got enough performance to run all the programs I want to run, which is going to be Windows 10 and T-Rex Miner, then we'll be happy with that. So that's the board. It does have HDMI, it's also got VGA, you've got your onboard LAN, 4 USB, and a little on-off switch. It does have an M.SATA. I'm not going to be using that. I'm going to be using one of these, just your typical external SSD, because they're a little bit cheaper. And again, this build is all about the budget. For power supply, so this is not a budget power supply, to be honest. This is a platinum, 80 plus platinum, but it was on sale, so I got that for a good price. So that's going to be our power supply for the build. It's fully modular, platinum, so that makes it nice and efficient. And then the fans, I just bought the cheapest fans I could get. These are $6 each, I think. I'll put a link to everything that I've bought with all the prices down in the description, because I always forget when it comes time to make the video. The power supply was, let's have a look, did I write that down? No, I didn't write that down, but that's okay. I'll get that to you when I cut back into the next part of the video for how much this guy was. The cards, so we just had a whole lot of these come into the country and they just flew out the door real quick. Awesome looking card, Radeon RX 6600 XT. So again, these are an entry level card, and so good for a budget build. They're a good all-rounder card from what I can tell. Obviously these are brand new to me, I haven't used them before, so we'll see how they go, but from everything I can tell, everything I've seen online, there's some great videos there on Red Panda and Red Fox Miner, and they test these, put them through their paces, and they're very efficient card. That's what's good about them. They don't draw a lot of power for what they do. You can get them in different iterations. This one is called the Red Devil, and I believe it has red RGB lighting on it, that sort of thing, so that might be quite cool to see how that goes. So these fans as well are red RGB, so I got those, so they'll hopefully complement it and the whole build will look pretty cool. And so yeah, there's the back of the board if you haven't seen it. So I think you get these in about 3 or 4 different incarnations of the same card, even within the power color range, so you can just choose which one suits you. I believe the performance limitation on them as far as gaming goes, if anyone's looking at them for gaming, is the 192 bit system bus. So there's got plenty of memory, 8 gigs of memory. They're PCIe 4, but obviously with a system bus of that speed, that's going to be your bottleneck. If you're into super high-end games, then you'll want to go for the next one up. But for mining, that should be sweet. Okay, and the frame, just a little old 60cm frame, just very standard. But what's going to be interesting is figuring out how we're going to mount this. So these boards are made they're made to go into a case, like a server case. And so of course they're not made for these frames, and none of the screw holes line up, and obviously they're bigger because they're riserless, so if you put that there, then you've got no room for a power supply or anything. So I'm going to have a bit of a play around with that and see what I can figure out how I'm going to mount that. But obviously that'll be a key part of this video, because there are other videos featuring these boards, but people tend to use custom made mining frames for them, and I wanted to see if I could figure out a way to easily use it with just a standard frame that you can just buy. Okay, so that's what we're gonna that's what we're going to do. So stay tuned, I'll have a muck about with that, and then we'll start unboxing and putting this all together. Cheers guys. Okay, so first things first, I've got the power supply opened up there now. This is it here, if you haven't seen one of these before. So it's fully modular, HX750. Now from what I can understand, this is like a higher end power supply that Corsair do. So I've used the RM series ones on all my other builds to date. But this one I think is slightly higher end, and certainly being platinum, it should be pretty good, should be really efficient. So as far as modular connections go, you've got your, I don't know what this is for yet, I'm going to have to check that out. I think that might be to do with the power rail selection. Anyway, so you've got your 24 pin ATX here, we've got some peripherals here, which those I think will come in handy because these cards that we're using need both an 8 pin and a 6 pin connection, and then we've got our 8 pins here. So I think what I'm going to do as far as using this frame and this board, I'm going to put that there, which is the usual position, default position. And then what I'm going to try is just treating the motherboard as a giant riser. And what I mean by that is, to stop any shorts on the cross rail, I've put foam, adhesive foam, just like what you would get on a riser card. In fact, that one there, I peeled off an old dud riser and just restuck it on the board. And what that'll do is that will provide a buffer against the steel cross rail so that we don't get any shorting of any of the circuits underneath the motherboard there. And then I think I'll try just sitting it there, because once the cards are on and fixed to the rail, that'll hold it. And we'll see if we can make something along those lines work. So bear with me, I'll throw a card on and hook it up, and we'll see if that'll work, because if it will, then that'll just be a nice easy solution for using one of these standard frames with this motherboard. So there's a card on, and yeah, check it out, it just sits there just nicely. That should work just fine. So as you'll notice, if you're using a card that falls outside of the space of the 2U faceplate at all, like these certainly do, they're quite a bit wider. The cooler sticks out at least probably 5 or 10 millimeters there, quarter of an inch. There's no way you'll get another card in the slot beside it, right? So if you wanted to use this for all 8 cards and use all 8 slots, you would have to make sure you used a narrow card. Interestingly, the 3060 cards are the gigabyte cards that I have on the Ravencoin rig are quite narrow. They don't fall outside of this plate at all, and I tested those and they fit perfectly. So if you want to use this motherboard with 3060s, that would work quite well. They would all fit on there. They'd be quite close, you've only got a small gap between them, but as you probably know, you don't have to stress out about that too much, because the way these cards are designed to cool is they draw air in and they take it out horizontally, right? So you don't have to be overly concerned. You certainly don't want them right up against each other, but you can have them quite close. And then if you have chassis fans, that will assist with the cooling as well. But for this build, I'm just going to have the 4 cards using this riserless motherboard, and then there is actually space on the end here, as you can see, I could put a riser in there and have a 5th card, and that would actually be quite cool, and then just loop it back around, and then obviously there is space there to have a riser connection, USB connection. So that might be something I can do in future to scale it out to 5 cards. So yeah, one other thing about this board is these here obviously are your 6-pin connectors in there for powering the riser slot. So you don't need to have a connection for every one of them if you're not using the slot. So you can kind of just think of that like you would your standard riser card. you have your 6-pin connection for it. Obviously there's no USB though to worry about. So we only need to connect for the slot that we're using, and they are labeled. So the slot's labeled and the pins are labeled. These other connectors here are for fans. If you want to use those, you've got chassis fan connection, and then you've got your standard ATX connection over there, and your SATA connectors that we'll be using too. Okay, all good. We'll get some more cards on here, and one thing I need to check is that all the screw holes are going to line up. If not, it's no big deal. You can just drill a few more. So just unboxing a few more things. With the HX750 power supply, I'll just show you what you get. You get some cable ties, little powered by Corsair decal, instruction book, warranty information, power cord, and yeah, this little sack of cables. It's kind of different. In the RM, they're just in a plastic bag. So I guess you buy the more expensive one, you get the more expensive bag of cables. So actually it does look a little different. They're nicely sleeved by the looks of things. So you get let's see what you get, because we need to know if we're going to have enough cables or if I've got to buy some more. So that's for the motherboard, that's the ATX connector. Then we've got CPU cable, yep, CPU. So I don't believe that this board even needs one of those. No, it doesn't. It's just the ATX. Oh, hello. Izzy's come to say hi, guys. There's no food in here, so she's gone. 2 CPU cables. A single to 8-pin PCIe, 1 Molex connector. Actually, that'll come in handy. We'll use that for the fans, I think. SATA cable, SATA to Molex to what's that? That might be for the fan. Check that out. That's another PCIe, so that's 2. Another Molex, another SATA, and another SATA. Okay, so that's pretty disappointing right from the word go, because we've only got 2 of these, and they're not even joules. So that's interesting. That's actually that's worse than what you get in the RM. In the RM you at least get 3 of those, so that's going to be a bit of a pain. Going to have to put some splitters on there, and possibly even try and get a hold of some more supply cables. Damn. So we've got plenty of these, but these can't be used because the CPU supply is actually different to what we need for PCIe. So even though they're 8-pin, you'll see that it's the wrong kind of 8-pin. So if you look at one of these, see how it has a different shape connector and it has one less active pin. So these are only good for CPUs. You can get adapters for these, but by the time you muck around with that sort of stuff, you might as well just buy another cable. Okay, so that's what's in there. I've got 3 of the cards on, and it looks like we should be able to find at least 1 screw hole for each of these. Should line up. And then I thought with the last one I'd unbox it for you guys. Again, one of my famous one-handed unboxing extraordinaires. Let's see if we can make this work. Oh, almost. Yes. Okay. So again, this is the Power Color Radeon RX 6600 XT Red Devil. You get a little sticker, you get a little card. Yep, hopefully that's not offending anyone's sensitivities. You get an installation guide. Okay, so you can scan the QR code and it'll tell you how to install it. You get an AMD show us your rig and win a prize card. You get one of these, so if you've got an ARGB motherboard, you can plug that in and that will synchronize the lights on the GPU with your motherboard. And then this is a 2-layered, so don't try and rip it out from here because it won't come out. I learnt that. You've got to take this layer off and then you can get to the card. Now the card, the anti-static bags, I noticed, they're just open, they're not sealed, so you don't have to worry if it's missing any tape. The NVIDIA cards typically come taped, so it doesn't mean that it's been opened, it just means that that's just how they are with the AMD cards. Okay, this is a tricky part with one hand. Sorry about the static noise there. And there you go, there's your card. It's a pretty cool looking card, really. So yeah, you've got an 8-pin and a 6-pin, so you need to factor that in for your cabling. There's the backplane. It does appear to be a kind of a metal, a steel backplane. I don't think it's plastic. You've got a switch there for BIOS, OC and silent. So it looks like you've got an overclock setting, or if you want it to be more quiet, there's a switch there. If the camera can pick it up, you can put it onto silent mode. And obviously it probably slows down the cards slightly and makes the fans quieter. So yeah, not a bad looking card. Dual fans, quite big fans. So happy with that. I'll get that thrown up onto the rig. Check it out. We almost got away with it. Almost got away with not having to drill at all. So we've got like a screw connection there. We've got our hole lines up there. One there. One there. But this guy here lands right in between the set. So that's okay. So we're going to have to drill one hole to get fixing for that one. So I'm going to take my little tiny little white Sharpie and try not to make too much mess and just mark that. And but what is good, okay, we've got to drill one hole, but actually that sits really well. It's once you've got the cards attached, it's holding that motherboard nicely in place, just like a gigantic size riser card. So no issues there, and I think it actually looks quite good with the cards spaced out like that. It looks about right, really. And then plenty of space on this side for a 5th card. So that's pretty cool. So I'm going to obviously take all this away before I drill this hole. I'm not going to be tempted to drill it in place because we do not want metal shavings getting anywhere in here, of course. That might seem obvious, but you know. So we'll get that one drilled out, and as soon as I've got the drill out, I may put some second fixings in, so I can have 2 screws in each card just to make it nice and solid. And then this here, if you haven't seen this before, it's just a little tag to warn you that the fan doesn't spin on these power supplies unless they're under load, just so you don't think you've got yourself a DOA power supply. That's the way they're designed. And I think that's about it for this stage. Oh, and I need to get the fans on, obviously, as well. So I'll do that at the same time. So when we come back, we'll have the fans on, we'll have the cards fixed down properly, and then we'll carry on with some cabling. Okay, there we have it. 3mm screw, and that is it. I have to get my white marker pen off there, but I think all going well that will be the only modification needed, and that is getting off a lot better than what I was expecting. So I drilled it with a 3mm drill, and this steel is certainly not overly heavy duty, and then I just tapped it with one of the riser screws. That's all you need to do. Just be careful as you tap it, you don't want it to break off, but that seemed to work just fine. No need for any special tools or anything like that, and I didn't bother drilling the second holes, just one will be enough. Don't want to make a mess of it. So next step will be to get the fans on. So again, these are those deep cool RF 120 fans. I basically bought these because they came in red, which I wanted because I want this to be like a red and black kind of a thing, and they were cheap. They were literally the cheapest fans on there, but they had pretty good reviews. They're supposed to be quiet and do the job, so that's cool. So they go on like that, and then we've got a Molex connector, which I haven't used for fans before, but I'm sure that should be just fine. So we'll get those on, 5 of those to go on, and then the power supply is going to go in, and you get what you need to fit that. You get your screws. The little plate comes with the frame, so that goes there, that little tab to secure the power supply to it. But the screws and your cable ties and your little badge come with the power supply itself. Okay, we'll get that bolted up. And I may actually fit the SSD while I'm doing it. That's just going to be stuck down with some double-sided. Okay, so that's the fans all on. There's no dramas there. They're dead easy. You got fixing for 3 screws on the corners and just 2 for these ones in the middle across the top, and the screws coming from the back. So I have in the past made the effort to drill these out a little bit more so I can put the screws in from this side, but that's fine. Coming in from the back, there's only 4 cards on this build. It's not too much of a major to get at if we need to take a card out to replace a fan. Got the cables, got the little power supply in place. You've got fixings here, here and here using the little tab that comes with the frame, and then the 24-pin ATX. So it has 2 parts to it that they have to both go in across the top row here, and then we've got our 2 PCIe connectors. So there's only 2 of them come with this one, so you've only got 4 connections, so obviously we're going to have to use splitters off of those. And then I've just got the little peripheral, 6-pin peripheral plugged in, and that's for these Molex connectors which will power the fans. So there's only 4 on a run on the cable that comes with it, but these fans use a piggyback cable, so in other words you've got a male and a female together, so that works out fine. You could plug in, what would that be, 8 if you wanted, if you needed 8 fans, or possibly 2, 4, 6, yeah 8, so we're fine there. And the other good thing about this type of a setup with the riserless motherboard that's going to go in here is we've got lots of space under here for cable management. So that's really good, because on a standard rig, obviously when you've got all your risers and you've got all those cables, there's a lot of cables to take care of. So I think this is going to end up being quite a neat and tidy looking little build when it's all done. So we'll get these all tied up. I'm going to try and do some cable management with that before I put the motherboard on, and then the motherboard goes on, and then the cards go on. So one thing I did forget that we need to do, and that's fit the SSD. So the SSD hard drive is obviously where you're going to install your operating system to. So install your Windows to that, or Hive OS if that's what you're going to use. Although if you're only just using Hive OS, you might prefer to use just the USB drive, because you won't need quite so much capacity. This is 120 gig. Now, one thing I had to learn the hard way is when it comes to sizing the SSD, you can get away with 120 gig in almost all cases, so you can just get the cheapest one. But if you've got a rig like my Ethereum rig that I built over here, this one, and you've got a lot of cards on it, or if you've got cards that have a lot of memory, like the 12 gigabyte cards, you could actually do better to get a 240 gig SSD. And the reason for that is if you're running Windows, the page file needs to be the size of all the memory combined in all the GPUs. And if you only use a 120 gig, then you'll find that you'll only have about 10 gigs left on the hard drive by the time you've done that. And so right from the get-go, you're quite constrained. And then if you've got, you know, if you want to do a backup on there, or you want to keep multiple copies of drivers or something, BIOS for flashing, whatever, you've just got no space. So it's good to get a 240 gig if you're going to have you know, a lot of cards, or you're going to have cards that have a lot of memory on them. But for this build, this guy will be fine. So you don't get any cables with the hard drive typically, but this comes with the power supply. So those are SATA connectors to a 6-pin, and they just go into any of the peripheral connectors there. And I'm just going to use some of this kind of spongy double-sided tape to stick it down, stick it to the frame. And then you'll need one of these, so that's how you connect it to the motherboard. These come with your motherboard. So if you can't find one of those, just check the box for your motherboard. Although if you've got one of these motherboards, it didn't come with any, so you'd have to buy that separate. I had this as a spare from a previous build, so bear that in mind. There'll be a few bucks on Ali or Amazon or something like that. Okay, so that's going to go on, and then almost ready for the motherboard. Okay, so I've just placed the board in place so I can figure out the cabling. I'm trying to figure out the neatest way of doing this, and it's actually not as straightforward as it perhaps could have been. So there's two reasons for that. One is these cards require two connections, like we talked about before. So you've got an 8-pin and a 6-pin that you need to accommodate instead of just an 8-pin. So that's an extra strand straight away. Then we've got the board to power as well, right? Or sorry, the riser slots to power the PCIe lanes. So with only two connections provided with a modular power supply, so that gives you 4, and then even with the splitters that gives you 8, and we need 12. So fortunately I had a spare from another Corsair power supply that I wasn't using. So bear that in mind, you will need 3. So that means unless you can find somewhere where you can buy an extra Corsair power supply, you would need to do the same build with these cards. You'll need to get the 850, because the 850 comes with your 3 cables, okay, your 3 PCIe's. And so without that you'll have to buy an extra one if you use the same power supply, so bear that in mind. That's why I always keep my spare cables, because you just never know when you might need them. So there you go. So we've got, obviously you need to map the connection, the power to the slot you're going to use. So 1 to 1, 3 to 3, 5 and 7. So yeah, get that sorted. I've got that sorted first, then I'll put the cards in, get them screwed down, and then that'll help me see how I'm going to manage these cables. Oh, the other thing too is ideally and typically, if you can, you want to power the same card and the same riser from the same strand, and that's ideal, because that way you're never in a situation where you've got a card that's powered up and the riser that's not, right? But in this case that's not going to be possible because we've got an odd number of connections. So that's alright, we'll make it work. Well, we'll see if it works. If it doesn't, we'll learn and we'll fix it. That's all part of the fun. Okay, I'll be back in a sec. Okay guys, check it out, she's all together. Fans on, cards fitted, PSUs installed. Now I know this is supposed to be a budget build, but I think we blew the budget on cable ties. Sorry about that, fellas. $3,000 for all the gear and $3,000 for the cable ties. So certainly I think you could do a better cable job than that, with a bit better planning. So I had to use that third strand, and if I hadn't had that spare from another build, then this wouldn't have worked. Would have needed to buy more cables. So what I would do next time is just buy the 850. If you buy the 850, you get the 3 PCIe dual cables. I mean, double check that before you buy it, obviously, but with the other 850s that I've bought, that's what's come with them, and then you're sorted. And then you get another 100 watts as well, and there's hardly anything in it as far as cost goes typically, especially if you can get them on sale. But otherwise I'm quite happy with that actually. I think what I would do in future as far as upgrades would be to replace the mustard and the black and mustard cables with some nice like braided cables or sheathed cables, just in black or even red maybe. That would probably look quite cool. But other than that, you can kind of see how I've got everything tied up underneath. Oh, there's still a little bit of tightening up needed under there. I can see a cable hanging down. But otherwise I think that's quite cool, and as you can see there's still space here for one additional card in future, and that would sit there quite nicely. Still plenty of room. So yeah, that's pretty good. So next steps obviously is to get a little USB key with Windows Installer on it and some LAN drivers for this motherboard, and then we boot up to that, and then we get Windows installed onto the SSD, and then we can get mining. So I'm going to run away and do that, and then we'll get this thing up and we'll see what our hash rates are going to be like. Okay you guys, so it's just about to plug in our monitor, keyboard, mouse and network cable, so we can start this thing up for the first time. But some of you smart guys out there, I'm sure, have already noticed this. There's a bit of a problem. Where am I going to plug this stuff into? Because that's the front panel of the motherboard right there, and of course there's a fan in the way. So you guys might have noticed I don't really edit my videos, I just record them as they are, because I figure the whole point of all this, right, is so we can experiment and learn and have a bit of a laugh. Should be a hobby after all. So anyway, yeah, you can totally make fun of me for doing that. That was pretty stupid. I'm gonna blame it on the fact I've been awake for 2 nights cleaning up after a flood. Okay, so if you don't tell anyone, I won't either. I'm gonna take this fan here out, and then we'll have access to the front panel to be able to plug and unplug as we need. And we don't really need a fan here. It's going to look a little bit like when you take one of the headlights out of a car for the air intake for the turbo. It's going to look a little bit like that, but it'll be fine. So I'm just going to undo that fan and undo all my cable ties that I've got underneath there, tying it up, and then we'll plug everything in, and then we'll get a look at the BIOS on this motherboard and see what we need to do in there. Okay, cheers. There we go. So I've popped the fan out, no big deal, only a few clips, and now we've got full access to the front panel connections, so that's all good. Still can't believe I did that, but anyway, no dramas. So we've got LAN cable plugged in for internet, keyboard, mouse, USB, and HDMI. So one thing I thought worth mentioning is obviously this corner of the board is not supported. Normally, if you've got a motherboard inside a computer case, it'd be supported. You'd have a front panel on there, and that would take care of that. So it's just worth being rather gentle with those connections when you're plugging them and unplugging them, just to make sure we don't put too much load on the board. Don't want to break anything off. And the other thing I thought it was worth mentioning, got the power supply plugged in, not turned on yet. It's just with these mining rigs, obviously everything's open, and when things are running, you've got moving parts, you've got fans, you've got hot components, you've got fragile and brittle components, you know, silicon chips, capacitors, and every one of these little silver connections you can see on the board, every part of that forms part of the circuit of the board. So obviously when that's powered up, when that's live, any tools or anything going in and out of there is a real no-no, because you can cause a short, and potentially there's a small potential there as well for electric shock, right? So it's just not worth it. So if you're doing anything on the board at all, anything on the rig, even just cable management or anything, always worth getting into the habit of powering it down. I know you probably don't want to, because you know you don't want to stop your miner and stop mining, right? But it's just a real good habit to get into, because otherwise sooner or later you're going to end up shorting an expensive component, or worse still, you might get a jolt, and we don't want that. Okay, so that's the end of that little lecture, but I thought it was worth mentioning in case you haven't worked on any sort of electronic stuff, computer stuff before. So yeah, we're all good to go. I haven't powered it on yet. Let's just hope everything works, otherwise it's a lot of work for nothing. If there's a problem with the motherboard or anything, obviously if you wanted to, you could always test the motherboard before you even put the cards on. In fact, it's really not a bad idea. You could even go ahead and install Windows and everything before you even fit the cards if you wanted to, and that really wouldn't be a bad idea at all. When you're building a rig like this for the sake of making a video, maybe we do things in a slightly different fashion if you want to progress through it, but I'm sure this will be fine. Yeah, next step will be I will power it on as it is, with no USB installer or anything in the drive, just so we can get a feel for the BIOS, make sure everything passes the power on self-test, that the BIOS loads, and then we'll have a bit of a look at the BIOS, just check some of the settings in there, make sure they're what we want, and then we can boot to Windows installer and get Windows on there. So let's power it on and we'll see what happens. 1, 2, 3. Well, we've got some lights, we've got some beeping, and we've got no boot device, obviously. So we'll try again and we'll see if we can get... Okay, I'm back. I had to put a new memory stick in the camera. Rookie mistake. So to get into the BIOS, it was the delete key. Okay, so the delete key gets you into the BIOS. But yeah, check this guy out, man. The red fans and the red RGB lights on these cards look pretty wicked. I'm pretty happy with that. I was hoping that would kind of end up looking like that. Red and black sort of thing going on. So yeah, pretty happy with how that's come out so far. Okay, so we're in the BIOS. Looks fairly standard. So normally what I look for in here, looks like there's no mouse control in this BIOS, it's just very basic. So you've just got to toggle your way through with the keyboard, no dramas. So what we kind of want to look for is our PCI settings. Just make sure 4G decoding is enabled, which it is. I figured it would be. Most of the mining boards are already kind of set up for mining. They sort of make that the defaults, I've noticed. It was the same with the other one, the BioStar board that I used in the last build. I really didn't have to change much. The other thing is sometimes it's worth enabling the PCIe speed to Gen 1. You don't have to, you can leave it on auto and see if that works. Just sometimes if you set it to Gen 1, it just means you don't have any of those detection issues that you sometimes get. But I think this all looks fairly standard. I'm going to just have a bit of a look through here rather than keep you waiting while I do that. And if I find anything that's worth changing, I'll let you know when I come back to the video. Okay, so there really wasn't much to worry about in the BIOS there at all. In fact, I would say you could almost get away with not even having to change anything. So what you are looking for though, just in case, is you want to just check that there's no power limiting options on there. So nothing about CPU power limit, power savings mode, any of those things. If they are, you want those all disabled. For mining, you want everything focused on performance, right? So you're really not worried about power saving at that level. At least you do all your power saving by tuning your GPUs. And the other thing is you want to make sure that boot to USB is enabled. If there's an option there, on this one there wasn't, so hopefully it'll just detect it and boot to it anyway. You want to make sure that the SATA hard drive has been detected, and it was, so that's ready to go for having an operating system installed on it. And other than that, what else can I think of? We talked about the PCIe configuration. There wasn't any to worry about on this motherboard. So yeah, so it should be good to go. So next step is I've got a USB key already with Windows installer on it. I won't go into detail on how to do that really in this video because there's nothing to it. Just Google Windows 10 installer or Windows 10 installer, and there's a tool on the Windows 10 site that you can just download, and then you double click on it and it will help you create a bootable USB key. But I will, if you've got any questions about that, just ask me in the comments down below and I'll do my best to answer those for you. Otherwise, I'll put a link to Seb's video. He's got a video all about how to get Windows installed on your mining rig, and it's an awesome video. I couldn't do any better. So I'll put a link to that in the description as well, and you can check that out. He's an awesome fella. He's got great videos, definitely worth having a look at his channel anyway. So alright, I'm going to plug this in and then I'm going to reboot. I'm going to put the camera down so I can do it gently with two hands and not go breaking the USB connection off the motherboard, and then we'll reboot and hopefully we'll be into Windows. So there's the USB key there, and that just booted straight in, no issues, no detection issues at all. So here we are in the Windows installer that no doubt you've seen before. I'm going to go through and install that. So the only thing really to tell you about that is I'm going to be using the Windows 10 Pro N option, which is the cut down option, because we don't need any of that bloatware that comes with it. I'm going to choose customer install option so that I can take the opportunity to not install any of the things that we don't need. So basically I'll be deinstalling, deselecting everything from the installation except the base operating system. That's literally all we need. and then after that I'm going to run through a Windows update cycle, obviously assuming that the LAN drivers are detected and it's on the network. If not, I'm going to have to go and find those and put those on a separate USB key. But I'm picking that this will just be using some kind of default Intel driver that's in the base operating system. The reason I think that is the case is because it came with no software at all, no compact disc, no instructions, didn't even come with a piece of paper saying, you know, scan this code or go to this site to get drivers. And I don't think they would sell many motherboards if they did that without using generic drivers that can detect. So I'll go ahead and do that, and if anything interesting happens, I'll pop back to the video and let you know. Okay, so I went through the first part of the installation fine, just default keyboard options. So this is the first prompt you're going to get where it asks you for a key. I'm just going to click I don't have a product key. And then this is what I was referring to, Windows 10 Pro N. So that's the one I like because it uses the least amount of disk space. And if you guys are wondering as far as activating Windows and all the rest of it, so basically if you don't activate Windows, you can't personalize it, right? So you can't change some of the personalization settings. That's kind of the way they restrict it. But you don't really need a lot of that for mining anyway. You're not going to use it. So you might find that you can just leave it unactivated and just use it just perfectly fine. Of course, I'm not talking here, I'm not discussing the legalities of that. I do think that that it's not actually illegal to use an unactivated copy of Windows, but don't quote me on that. I'm not 100% sure. So if you're worried about that at all, then definitely do your own research on that one. So this is where we could load a driver if we need to, like a LAN driver or whatever. So I'm just going to hope that we don't need that. It's found the disk. This is a SATA disk that we're installing to. So we're just going to go next on that one. And it'll format it for us. It'll copy Windows over from the installation USB key that we've made. And then we'll be into the features, the updates, and all the rest of it. Okay, so I'm just running through a Windows update cycle and getting all the updates for Windows. So what we'll do is we'll get it fully updated, and then we'll go into system settings and disable Windows updates, because obviously you don't want it to automatically try and update itself when it's in the middle of mining. That's not going to be good. So, but certainly we'll get it all updated, and I've went into the optional updates as well, and then just selected to also download and install all the drivers, and that'll just get all the latest drivers for this board. Basically everything is all Intel drivers, so that's fantastic. I mean, that's really good. That means it's dead easy to get drivers for the board. We won't have to go hunting anywhere, they'll just all come down from Windows Update. But while it's doing that, what we can also do is set up the remote connections, allow remote connections so we can connect to it. So all you got to do is go into the search field there, type remote, and then you want to use this little option here that says allow remote connections to this computer. You just click on that, and then we want to go down to remote desktop, and we want to go change settings to allow remote connections to this computer, show settings. See this top one here, allow remote assistance connections to this computer. If you want to, for additional security, you can uncheck that. It won't be used. And then we've got this one, allow remote connections to this computer. So that's for allowing remote desktop connections on the same network. So essentially, we go into here, the admin account that we've already used for the initial login already has access, and that's going to allow us to connect to this mining rig from any Windows computer on our home network. So you'll be able to, just connect to it, keep an eye on it, do all your administration on it without having to walk into your garage or into your shed or wherever you've got your miner sitting. And you don't need to worry about TeamViewer or any of those things unless you want some of the additional features that come with that. I don't actually know. Probably for access from the internet and that kind of thing, if that's what you need, then you'd have to get a tool like that, but otherwise this remote desktop protocol is just fine. And then we click OK, and then there's just this setting here so that it doesn't hibernate. So because we don't want that, then we won't be able to connect to it. So we want to go change plan settings. This is under power options. Turn off the display. It's up to you, but I set that to never. Put the computer to sleep. I set that to never. And then we'll just check what's under advanced because I can't quite remember. We want to set that to high performance. There we go. So save changes, and then that should make sure that we've got what we need in the way of power settings and remote desktop settings. So I thought I'd show you guys a few things that I've done just to get ready for installing the mining software. I've gone into my documents and created a little folder called mining, and then I've gone into Windows security, and then virus and threat protection, settings, manage settings, and then under exclusions here, just added an exclusion for that folder. And that's because mining software is normally detected by Windows security as a virus or a Trojan, and it'll block it. So by doing that, we can then download T-Rex into this folder. We can keep all our batch files in this folder, and hopefully we won't have any issues with it being incorrectly flagged as a virus by Windows. Other than that, I've also renamed the PC. Rename this computer. If you want to know how to do that, you go to this PC app, right click properties, rename this PC. So I like to give it a name that I'm going to recognize. That'll apply after it's rebooted, and just that way you can recognize your rig in the pool, find it on the network and know which computer it is. So that should be about it. Now we've got to do a restart, and then we'll come back and we'll get the AMD drivers set up, and we'll get the mining software set up. So I've finished with Windows updates now, so I've just gone into services, and we're going to go to properties, and we're going to set that to disabled, and then we won't have to worry about automatic Windows updates. And I've gone to powercolor.com, and this is where we're going to hopefully find the drivers for our GPUs. So let's have a look. Let's see if we can find what we need here. Download drivers, and we want RX 6600 series, RX 6600 XT, looks like that should be all we need. We'll get those downloaded and installed. Not a bad looking website. Very easy to find the drivers. That was pretty good. And the cards came with a little card, so you can join this Devil Club if you want to. I don't think I'm going to join that. Freaky stuff might start happening. But yeah, I guess for gamers they might be into that sort of thing. Okay, Let's get these drivers installed and then we'll cut back. Okay, so we are up and mining. Sweet. So I was mucking around trying to get T-Rex. I downloaded T-Rex and started setting it up, and then I thought, oh, I'll just check the settings and stuff, and then I realized T-Rex doesn't support AMD cards at this time. It's NVIDIA only, so no T-Rex. Man, I'm having a shocker. Okay, but I've downloaded Team Red Miner, and I'll show you my settings. So it's pretty straightforward to set up, no dramas at all. It's kind of similar to T-Rex in a way. It's just a batch file. So you've got to set in here the location of your Team Red Miner software and the executable, and close it in brackets if there's any spaces in there. And then -A sets your algorithm, which is ETH hash, and then -O is your stratum. So that's obviously the stratum for the pool that you're using. So the idea is to get the closest one you can to you, to try and keep those shares working, try and minimize your stale shares. So I'm using the Asia pool, and then this is your wallet address, your Ethereum wallet address. Obviously this is Ethereum we're mining, and then this is the name of your rig. So you put the name of your rig in there just so you can differentiate it on the pool. And then -P -X is for the Ethermine pool. That's all you need. If you're using a different pool, you might have different password requirements in there. And then enable compute is required, it seems, for just error correction. There's an error that comes up when you first run the batch file that says you've got to use -- enable compute. So I did that. And there is also, you need to know, there's a small registry key that you've got to run, or that I had to run. I assume it's for if you're using these types of cards with this Team Miner software, it's the Windows TDR Fix registry, and that just sets a couple of, by the looks of it, a couple of registry keys that are needed to get this working. So there you go. So we've got 31.7, 32.9, 33.2, 32.8, total of 130.7 mega hash. I really haven't done much with the overclocks. I just set a few clocks. I haven't had time to really try and dial it in. Hopefully might be able to get a bit better than that. But these are the settings I'm using. I'll call them out to you in case you can't quite see it. We've got 1500 on the core clock. We've got 2350 on the memory. We've got the power limit at +20. So that's percentage basis. I just had to play around with that until I got it to the power draw that I wanted. Looks like about 57 watts, 56, 58, 57. So probably can play around with that a little bit more. I believe some people are getting these cards running at about 50 watts, which is pretty good. Fan speed I've got set at 35, and that seems to be keeping the temps nice and low, at least at this stage. And then at the wall we are drawing 378 watts total, and that includes the that monitor that's plugged in, which takes 50 watts. So about 320 watts for the whole rig, motherboard, fans and cards. So that's pretty cool. Pretty happy with that. That's nice and efficient. And there you go, guys. So that's what you can do with a riserless motherboard. Standard frame, 60cm frame. The cheapest fans I could find, $6 each. And the AMD Radeon 6600 XT cards. You can hear how quiet it is. Very little heat, almost none actually at this point. So yeah, that's pretty good. Got any rejected shares? Nothing yet, not that I can tell. I'll go check out the Ethermine pool, see if there's any stale shares being reported in there, but my internet connection here isn't great. I'm way out in the sticks, so I get stale shares anyway. But as long as the rejected share count's keeping down, that means the overclocks aren't too bad at this stage. So there we go, guys. I hope that's been useful, and hopefully that'll give you some ideas of, especially if you want to use one of these budget riserless mining motherboards. So I'll put a link to all the stuff in the description, all the components that I've used. And again, sorry it took a while to get this video out, guys, just with the flood that we've had and the lockdown, everything's taken longer. But I'm quite happy with that result. So if that's been useful, give us a like, that would be really appreciated. And if you want to see future build videos, comparison videos, then go ahead and subscribe and hit the notification bell if you want to. What have I got coming up? I'm going to do a comparison video of my 3 rigs. I've got 3 rigs running now. So I've got the original 12 GPU Ethereum rig, I've got my Ravencoin rig, and then I've got this rig running as well. So I'll get Ergo set up too. I might put the 3060 rig over onto Ergo because I think that might be best for those cards, and get that all set up. But yeah, I want to, once they've all been running for a month, I'm going to do a video just showing what the profit's been on all of them, and then it just helps us to get some ideas for which kind of rig to build for the best return on investment. I'm doing it more for fun, more of a hobby than to make a profit, but you know, it's all good fun. And if you can make a little bit of money while you're doing it, then fantastic. So any questions you got, put them in the comments down below. I'll do what I can to help you out. Any questions, anything I've missed, there's bound to be stuff that you want to know. And yeah, we'll get that sorted for you. And if I can figure out some better overclock settings for these two, get those hash rates up. Oh, 33 megahertz on some of them, that's not too bad for that kind of wattage. But I'll if I can tune it and tweak it and get it any better, I will put that in the comments. Or if you guys know any better settings that you think I should try, go ahead and do the same. That would be awesome. Thanks heaps, guys, take care and stay safe. We'll see you on the next one.